So, Operation Discord was inspired by this book, Principia Discordia, which was written by Malaklips the Younger and Lord Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst. It is basically it's either a religion disguised as a joke, or a joke disguised as a religion, one of the two. The very last words in it are an apology to anyone who's actually read the book, because Xeris, the goddess of discord, does like to just talk rubbish. And also, this book, the Illuminatus trilogy, which was written by Robert Shee and Robert Anton Wilson, and it was written in the 1970s, became a cult classic, and as it says in the back here, it tackles all the important cover-ups of our time. Who shot the Kennedys? Why there's a pyramid in a $1 bill? So, the ultimate conspiracy notebook. Music. To start with the music, the backbone of the music was made with trackers, which were very popular in the early 90s. They probably wouldn't look like a big deal to a young person now, but at the time it was really the first time ever that somebody in their house without bespoke studio equipment could do things like looping and time stretching, slicing, sampling. It was basically a software version of a sampler, but a sampler back at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, was not cheap. This you could just put into your Amiga 500, load some samples in, and you could be off and running really quickly. So I'll just load something in here to demonstrate. So that's a beat for one of the Operation Discord tracks. Now, the fact that the samples are all 8-bit and they were all recorded with the poly chip on an Amiga 500 gives it a kind of like warmth, kind of maybe slight clatteriness. There's audible quantization errors. It gives it this kind of magical sound that you maybe wouldn't get with a modern sampler or something like FL Studio. For the drums all sound absolutely perfect and flawless. Also, you got your built-in oscilloscopes up here that are kind of cool. You can go in and hear, edit individual samples, cropping, cutting, pasting, crossfading. Now this is all stuff, if you were trying to do that with a reel-to-reel tape recorder in the 80s, you would have an absolute nightmare of a time with it. Fuck about with brass scissors and tubes of glue and all the rest of it. You had to make tape whoops in those days by sending the tape out around a load of mic stands, and then back into the playback head. So this really gave you the kind of power to do your own real kind of studio recordings for the first time. The album, The Eve of Rot, starts with a homage, shall we say, to the War of the Worlds.
No one would have believed in the opening quarter of the 21st century that human affairs were being monitored by a cabal of self-obsessed cretins. No one would have dreamed we were being coerced and manipulated, like the ringmaster leading the maggots off the cliff. Few men even considered the possibility of criminals and degenerates running an entire nation. And yet, across the Gulf of America, minds immeasurably inferior to ours regarded other countries with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they composed their tweets against us.
So that's Mr. Stephen McQueen there talking. He has an excellent voice for doing these kind of voiceover things. So we tend to use him a lot for that. He also plays live bass lines and all the Discord stuff, which we found all kinds of ways to fuck up with effects, distortion, head crushers, saturators. We even invented our own effect called the F0 glitch. The F0 glitch works by going through the WAV file and selecting a block, but staying away from the header and the end of the file, because if you mess around with these it won't play. And what you do is you replace the hex values FF. Now as you can see up here, FF has a binary value of 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, yeah. Which is decimal 255. If you change the FFs to FE, it will change the decimal value to 254, and the low one there will become 0. If you change it to FD, then you'll change more ones into zeros, and we called it the F0 glitch because taken to its limit, it would change the 4 low bits to zeros, and then which would be hex value F0, and then you get really hideous crackly distortion, and it's of a type it doesn't sound like the distortion you get through analog saturation or using a digital saturator like Head Crusher or whatever. It's really hideous crackling. The album artwork with this Operation Discord logo, these were photographed up and down the country between Ayrshire and Scotland, and Monmouth in South Wales. The reason I was in South Wales is because Susie Blue is one of my musical partners in crime, and who I'm very close to lives down there, so we spend a few weeks every year living in each other's houses. So I find Monmouth quite inspiring. It's the top of the town is built on top of an old slaughterhouse, which the locals have done lots of graffiti tagging and writing in, which I thought looked pretty cool, so I started to take photos of them with a view to making up this Operation Discord logo. Again, in the AI era, digital era, I think it's kind of cool sometimes just to have something that's full analog and get nothing digital about it, and in the mix. We also got a really cool shot down in Monmouth of a set of tunnels that made it into one of the videos. I drove through it and Susie held the camera up. On one of the trips back as well, I got some really cool footage of the Pennine Tower, which is it's in a service station near Lancaster, and I really love that tower because as the cars in the motorway are passing under it, you can hear the sound reflecting off the bottom of the Pennine Tower from above you, and it generates some really cool binaural phasing effects, which I've actually used in some of the music. But I wanted to have that in one of the videos as if it was a big surveillance tower. I kind of liked it because it was hexagonal, so kind of a little bit of a kind of joke in the Pentagon. In the video I called that building the hexagon instead, and it looks apart because it's got all these mobile phone masts and what have you in the top of it. So also in Monmouth there's a nice statue of Charles Rolls in the town square. Seemingly his ancestral family home was near Monmouth, so he had connections to the town. It's also got a really cool medieval fortified bridge, which is one of the last remaining, if not the last remaining in Britain. The videos have themes like surveillance, misinformation, misuse of people's information, privacy concerns. It's all stuff to worry about in the modern world. There are levels of invasions of privacy that the Stasi and the DDR or Stalin or whoever could only have fucking dreamt of in their time. If you were to try to force it on people, they would rebel, but if you put it in an app and in a phone and tell people it's the must-have thing, then they'll run out in droves to buy it. I try to have Linux in most of my computers. I do have one with Windows on it, Windows 10, just because there are times when I need compatibility with other Windows machines for working or doing certain projects. I never even wanted to get into kind of MIS. What I would really like is like it was in the old days in the Amiga, where you just put a disc in and 60 seconds later you are ready to rock and roll this kind of shit now. Or if you're running Windows, you have to like spend a shitload of time constantly undoing updates and getting rid of bloatware and trying to re-establish your privacy. Linux gives you much tighter control and much more privacy, but there are things in Linux that require a lot more getting your hands dirty, so to speak. One of the things I like looking at thematically is the whole thing about conformity and uniformity, and frankly it fascinates me just how much of that you find in the countercultures. I mean, if you go to Whitby Goth Weekend, for example, you're going to find a lot of nonconformists who are all dressed in very similar uniforms. In some countercultures you've got gatekeeping and conformity to levels that the mainstream establishment could only dream of. If you're the government, I don't think you're going to solve society's problems and get rid of dissent to just by having people roughed up. No, you have to actually look at what's making them pissed off. Britain is a country that's, a lot of it's in ruins. In many ways it's no longer a rich country. In a lot of areas it's quite a poor country attached to a rich city. There are towns all up and down the north of England, the Welsh valleys, the Scottish valleys. There are cities that are in an absolutely horrendous state. Boarded up shops, abandoned buildings, abandoned workplaces. It's really not good, and if it's not fixed by a sensible government, we are going to end up going the American way and voting in a bunch of nut jobs who will end up doing unspeakable things to bring on the ruin of this country. I don't generally find very many politicians inspiring. There have been the odd one or two. I really liked Yingluck Shinawatra, not just because she looks hot as hell in the uniform, but she actually took money off the urban elite rich and used it to give subsidies to impoverished rice farmers that put her quite high in the estimation. Inequality, I think, is the root of just about all the world's current problems. If the inequality was dealt with, the rest would fall into place. Here goes. Rolling.
Following the demise of the popping cherries, there was a chasm, a void that needed to be filled in music folklore. Cue Operation Discord.